All right, now over to the devastating forest fires still burning across the Amazon region. The fires have been raging on for the past 3 weeks. Experts say most of the fires were set by farmers or ranchers clearing existing farmland. Now, earlier this month, Brazil declared a state of emergency with more than 2,500 active fires burning out of control. Just today, world leaders at the G7 summit expressed their concerns and now threatening economic retaliation against Brazil over those wildfires. So to discuss the impacts and the fallout of all of this, we're being joined now by Professor of Environmental Studies at Florida State University, Bron Taylor. Professor Taylor, thank you for being with us. So it seems that world leaders are
You're very welcome.
The world leaders seem to be recognizing that these fires are actually a global issue requiring a collective response. We've seen countries come together to tackle climate change before with the Paris Climate Accords. Do you think they can coordinate a similar response to this catastrophe? And what kind of response would be effective at this point?
Well, if past behavior is a good predictor of future behavior, which it usually is, there's not a lot of room for optimism. The Paris Accords were a fantastic step in the right direction, but they were far too anemic compared to what is needed. What's really needed are binding agreements, not voluntary agreements, with enforcement mechanisms, which the nation states are always reluctant to do because they're concerned about their national sovereignty. That very dynamic is playing out today, where the Brazilian government is resisting sanctions and other criticisms that are coming in from the world community.
And Professor, scientists are calling the carbon that's being released from these fires and loss of overall forest a quote doomsday bomb, and some have even compared it to a WMD. What kind of ecological impact are we actually talking about here at this point?
Well, we need to think about the Amazon as part of a global, as part of the biosphere, a global environmental system. Traditionally, estimates have ranged from 10 to 20% that the Amazon contributes to the production of atmosphere into the biosphere. Now, with deforestation, and we've only lost some 20% of the Amazonian rainforest, recent studies are suggesting that we're no longer producing more oxygen and sequestering more carbon dioxide out of the atmosphere than we used to. And indeed, we're probably at a kind of a steady state. The consequences of that are devastating. Not only less oxygen, but the sequestering possibility of the forest. A single tree can pull down between 1 and 4 tons of carbon dioxide out of the atmosphere, and those trees are simply being burnt to the ground for a number of reasons that are due in part to global economic demand and local needs. Peasants basically often invading the forest to engage in economic enterprises, from ranching to mining to participating in agriculture, usually soy agriculture.
And Professor, can you talk to us a little bit about the various species that are being harmed by, being pushed out by the ranchers and the farmers? And, that we know that the president, Jair Bolsonaro, is encouraging these ranchers to do this. But, there's this term called feedback loop dieback. Can you talk a little bit about that and the creatures that are actually being harmed by this?
Sure. Well, it's probably helpful for most people to hear that some of the species in Amazonia exist only in a very small area, sometimes even just as little as an acre or two. So when that area is burnt and cleared, those species are gone forever. And most folks have at least heard, but it's critically important to recognize that many of the medicines we use today come directly from the natural world, from species that have existed. Sure. And when those are gone, we may be losing medicines that could prevent all sorts of and cure all sorts of diseases in the future. Now, in terms of feedback loops, again, if we think about this in a biospheric dimension, when you lose the rainforest, you lose dozens of species, and the whole rainforest starts to basically dry out. The drier it gets, the less you get the regular rain cycle, and then it just repeats the cycle of getting less and less moisture into the soils and into the forest. Consequently, a lot of the species that depend on that will go out, will die out, And the forest is also being dramatically fragmented. Consequently, there's a lot of organisms that can only live within what we would call an interior forest ecosystem. And so they're dying out as well. So we get this kind of global warming that's increasing around the world, species extinctions accelerating, and of course, we're also anticipating and already seeing signs that the sea levels are rising because of increasing temperatures and the decline of the ice sheets on terrestrial sites, such as Antarctica and Greenland and so forth. So there's just this one insult to the biosphere triggers additional insults to the biosphere, which trigger additional insults, and we end up in this kind of nasty cycle where one thing gets worse and it makes other things worse, which makes other things worse. That's what they're talking about when scientists talk about feedback loops.
Wow. Certainly an ominous outlook if these fires don't get put out very soon. Thank you so much for coming on today and breaking this down, making it easier for us to consume. Professor Braun Taylor, thank you so much for sharing your expertise.
Hey YouTube, thanks for checking out our channel. We hope you enjoyed the video. We have tons of content for you just like this. For more of RT America's one-of-a-kind news and analysis, be sure to subscribe and never stop questioning more.